In this video, I'll go over how to set up the proportions in your self-portrait drawing. I'm going to work with a reference photo of my son, and I'll start by drawing a line right straight down through the middle. This will help me when I'm comparing this with the drawing on my piece of paper. As explained in the assignment, you can work with a mirror or some kind of an image on a tablet device or a reference photo. If you were working in the studio at school, you would be working just with a mirror. Part of the reason I'm using a reference photo is so you can compare what I'm doing with the image. In the slides, I show how to begin the proportions with a circle. And I just freehand everything. If you have a hard time drawing a circle, you can use a compass or find something and just trace around it. I think it's important that you understand that nothing has to be perfect. I'm going to have to adjust whatever I come up with. So I'm just trying to get the rough idea of proportions here. I'll find the center of the circle and draw a line through. That's the brow line. And I'm going to make the lines pretty dark so you can see it in the camera. If I were doing this without filming, you wouldn't be able to see the lines. I'd be drawing them much lighter. Within the circle, draw a square. Take the size from the center line to the bottom of the square and add that to the bottom of your vertical line. This is roughly where the bottom of the chin will end up. Now these proportions make a generic human face. They don't actually match the face of my son. So you'll see that by the end of this drawing, this chin is too far down. Connect the chin to the middle of the circle. The next step is to lay out where the eyes go. These are equally distant marks where the distance from the outside to the square is about 1/2 or 1/3 the length of the marks between. And the space between the eyes is roughly the same as the width of the eye. And these marks are to the corners of the eye generally. I think it pays to rough in the features. I wouldn't go ahead and start drawing anything too dramatic from here because you may have to move things. His eyebrows are really low because he's squinting into the sun. He's not really angry, it's just really bright when I took the photo. The inside corners of the eyes are the width of the nose roughly, and you notice that I drew in the iris of the eye. The middle of the eye is roughly the outside of the mouth. So you'll see me drop a vertical line to set how wide the mouth is. He's sucking in his cheeks, so his mouth isn't actually this wide. I'm drawing the middle of the mouth at the bottom of the circle that I initially drew. After the first clip, I sped the video up to 2 times life speed. This is just to make it go a little bit quicker. Now, some people's ears will stick right out to where the circle is, and some people's ears are closer to the side of their head. I'm just roughing in where the ears go. They start a little bit below the brow line and go down to the bottom of the nose, roughly, for most people. There are a lot of this is appropriate for most people when you use a system like this. The hairline is roughly at the top of the square within the circle. Now, this, again, is very general. Everyone's forehead has a little different proportion to it. I'm roughing in some hair just to see if that will change the way I view the rest of the proportions on the face. I am looking back and forth, and I think it's important that you do study your reference photo. When I'm looking at it, I'm trying to decide what needs to be adjusted to get closer. And now that I've drawn the drawing, I can see exactly what's wrong with it, but while you're drawing, you may not notice this. I'm going to start by changing the chin. First, I'll make it too long, and then I'll make it shorter. And that actually isn't what the problem is here. This method of developing facial proportions using a system is something that my colleagues want you to know how to do. This isn't actually how I draw portraits. I think it's important that you see that I start off establishing the size of the head, but from there I would just be observing rather than drawing a bunch of horizontal and vertical lines. It is valuable, though, to learn this method as well. Make sure that you understand the assignment. You will be drawing part of the shoulders at least, and you will be drawing a background when you draw your self-portrait next week. Unlike the videos some weeks, I'm having you watch virtually all of what I did because it's important that you see that I'm not skipping anything. Now that I have things roughly in place, I'm going to lighten up the guidelines. They're not completely erased away. They're still there. It's just harder for the camera to see. They're a bit distracting, so by taking the guidelines away, I can look more closely at the features. Can you spot what's wrong with this? It's pretty obvious to me right now that the nose is basically too long. I need to take a little slice right out of the middle of the face and move the bottom of the nose closer to the eyes. And if I do that, I think I'll have the proportions pretty close. It takes a while for you to understand this, and my recommendation is to draw to maybe this point and then step back and look. Look in the mirror, look at your tablet device, look at your reference photos, whatever it is that you're using, and just look for a few minutes. I find that adding some of the topography of the face will help me to see whether it's correct or not, so that's what I'm doing here. If things don't look right, don't hesitate to erase half the drawing. This is just working out the proportions to help you next week when you draw your self-portrait on good drawing paper. Don't do this on your good drawing paper. You should be making this on newsprint or your sketchpad paper, and then transfer the most important parts. My drawing is close to life size, and the reference photo isn't, but one way that you can check proportions is like I'm doing here, using a pair of calipers, or you could just use a ruler. This will help you to see where you're maybe off and maybe where you're right. I just decided that the chin is too low, so I'm going to shorten up this proportion. What that does is it means I have to erase the mouth again probably as well. Now, this is all you need to do this week. If you get to here, your job is done. Take a photo and show us what you've drawn. I am going to go a little bit further and basically practice for next week. I'll start to lay in some value on this drawing, and that will help me to decide if the proportions are correct as well. I am going to use a drawing that has interesting lighting, and the values that I put in here will help me to understand what I'd like to do better next week. Again, the most important part this week is just to get the proportions as close as you can. You're going to be investing quite a bit of time drawing just one drawing, and you're going to want to make the drawing as good as you can get it, especially if you're drawing yourself. So the proportions need to start out in the right place in order to ensure success. It doesn't matter how well you draw an eyeball if the eyeball is in the wrong place. You can think of this drawing as a kind of map of where things are going to end up when you make your finished drawing. Most of the lines that you see will actually just be places where values change. The edge of a value change is essentially a line in this drawing. I've been using a soft pencil this whole time in order for the camera to be able to see the lines, but I find that the soft pencil actually erases a lot better than a hard pencil that makes a very light line. Don't be afraid to make the lines dark because, again, this is not your drawing. I just decided that the bottom of that ear was in the wrong place. There's lots and lots of little adjustments that you can make. Don't worry about drawing everything that's on the face this week. You are going to be transferring this drawing to another piece of paper. You can draw the fine details when you do that. Just get the proportions correct. like the assignment suggests. Here I've sped up the drawing just so you can see what happens when I add value to the drawing. Again, you don't need to do this. You could stop right where I just ended. This is me practicing. I'm actually experimenting with how I might want to do the drawing next week. Your self-portrait is the last drawing of the semester, and you can proceed with that drawing how you choose. Use the tools that you like. I'm experimenting here because I have some idea that I'd like to make the drawing have reasonable value system. And by putting values in here and experimenting, it'll help me be more confident when I get to drawing next week. Notice that I work on all of the drawing. I'm not just going to draw one eyeball and then draw an ear or something. I'm trying to get value established all over the drawing so that I can evaluate how I'm doing and what it looks like. Because I filmed this process, I know that it took me just under 25 minutes to lay out the proportions in the drawing. And I think I spent another 20 minutes doing values like you see here. You can probably tell that the values do help you to understand the proportions even better. So this is optional, but I found the exercise helpful. I'm not going to try and finish this drawing. This is as far as it's going to go. Remember, enjoy this process. Drawing is supposed to be something that's a challenge, but something that's rewarding as well.